All right. Welcome back, everybody. Jacob Davis here at Leverage Nation. Today's entrepreneur, today's amazing business owner, Jason Elias. Jason, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Say hi to our audience and tell us who you are, man. Thanks for coming on the
Yeah,
show.
fantastic. Well, Jacob, first of all, thank you for having me. It's an absolute pleasure. We just got to connect pretty recently,
Yeah.
but it's been a joy, and I don't think we meet people unintentionally. So I'm glad we're able to connect. And thank you for connecting us so quickly. Jason Elias, born and raised in a small town up in the Northeast called New York City, Brooklyn, New York. So a small town boy, and started my career mostly in the financial markets, Morgan, Merrill, a few other places, but went to DC for a few years and played the entrepreneur game for a while, where you're not quite an entrepreneur, you're entrepreneurial thinking inside of other people's organisms. And right now here out in Texas, building something very special we designed for young men. We think there's a big need for it. Young men that are on the path to make themselves the best versions of themselves, to be the head of their families. And we're excited about it. And we're aligning ourselves with the right coaches. We're aligning ourselves with the right leverage opportunities. And we're also aligning ourselves with the right people, right? So alignment and assignment, also men of faith, and figuring it out along the way, and continuing to walk down that path.
Yeah, yeah. Man, I really appreciate that. And thank you, Jason. It was great connecting with you recently in Nashville. And um, I just got to ask, man. So is it, let me see, is it the Jets or is it the Cowboys, right? Because you said you came from New York to Texas, right? I mean,
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
it's interesting is that growing up, I was always a big baseball guy. I grew up playing baseball. My father was a big New York Mets fan.
love it.
So
Yeah.
we grew up New York Mets, blue and orange. They're in the playoffs right now. And, interesting enough is it's usually Mets, Jets, Giants,
Okay.
Yankees.
Okay.
But for whatever reason around my generation, maybe the rebellious side of me decided that it was going to be Mets, Giants.
Mets.
So Mets, Giants, and at least the Giants have had two Super Bowls in my lifetime, which is I can't say about the Jets, even though all my Jet fan buddies are watching right now, cursing me out. That's completely fine. But it was Mets, Jets. But what I will say is that living in Texas, I've grown to appreciate what the culture of the Dallas Cowboys has built. I think that's probably the best way to say it. There's an incredible culture here. I happen to be sitting in a building right next to the Dallas Cowboys headquarters in Frisco, Texas, and the culture that they've built, not only around uh, the quality of people that culminate to work for the team, but the experiences they put together for the fans, the experiences they put together for the staff. I mean, it's really interesting to watch. And I was very lucky to have a pretty extensive conversation with Jones once, about a half hour, 40 minutes or so, and we're standing in his suite, and he speaks in stories and stories and stories, and he's giving these unbelievable stories of how he bought the team, and he looked at me and he said, "Jason, you know how I built all of this?" And I said, "No, sir, I don't." And he looked at me and he said, "Partnerships. Everything is about partnerships. Don't look at things as selling to people. Don't look at things as sponsorships from people. Go into every business relationship as a partnership." And ever since that day, it's hard not to at least root for the Cowboys,
Mm,
while maybe wearing some Giant socks along the way. But it allows me to appreciate the culture when I can appreciate the foundation that it was built on and their goal to bring value to their fan base.
man, I love that. I love that. Because a lot of folks, teams are teams, right? I mean, we support our favorite team for different reasons, and then of course, there's the fan base, and then there's the hater base, and all that stuff. But
Hmm. Hmm.
ultimately, like to be able to connect with somebody like that, right? And then just hear, I mean, that was super valuable, right? Like to hear from a gentleman who has done some amazing things in business, right?
Sure.
Win or lose, the team wins or lose. Like, I mean, there's only so much control people have over that, right? Coaches and players and all that, and owners and all that. But an owner, like you said, who's accomplished some amazing things. I mean, you talk about culture and just deep rooted, right? Man, that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head when you said culture, right? I mean, one of the things that we're building out in our movement for young men, that's a
Yeah,
big part of the conversation, which is culture. And we've
yeah,
even taken a word to develop our culture, develop our core values, the word preside, right? What
yeah,
does it mean to preside, right? Why is the president called the president? Because he or she presides over something, right? So the
yes,
idea is that if you're going to be the head of your family, your job is to preside over your family. And then what does preside mean, right? And we've broken it down to protect, to have
sure,
resilience, to do everything with excellence, to provide a level of stoicism, right?
yeah,
Because if we're reactive to things, it makes things much more difficult. Integrity always, the determination and the experience. I mean, all of those things go into what it means to lead your family, to be to preside over something or someone, which should be the goal of all of us, especially those men of faith, because that's
right,
what God told us to do, right? Take dominion. Take
yes,
dominion of what he wants us to take dominion of. And in order to do that, there's a certain skill set that we need to develop along the way from boyhood into manhood. And that's extremely important, and that's who we serve.
man, I love that, and that's, I guess that's what drew me into the conversation and the topic, the modern day Don. So, um, could you let me circle back just a quick minute, right?
Please.
So, financial background, right? That's what you were in, the financial industry,
Hmm.
and then you moved to Dallas, Texas, which is where we're at now, right?
Hmm.
Frisco. Um, so, are you still in the like full time financial industry?
No, not
Profession?
now.
Not now. Okay. All right. So, is modern day Don what you're focusing on? Is that or are you still what do you do?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Modern day Don is the core of the passion, right? That's the
got you.
calling, right?
Got
And
you.
I think that's a word sometimes that is either not used or misused, right?
Yes.
And the reason why it's an interesting way to frame things is that there are ways we make money.
Yeah.
Right. There's multiple answers to that. At the same
Right.
time, there are things that are of interest to us, and then
Sure.
there's what we believe are our calling. So, as I've taken the opportunity to get in front of the camera, to
Yeah.
speak about, my own struggles in building the characteristics and the foundation of what I believe are a strong man,
Right.
and then leading me down the path and the calling of saying, well, you know what, it took you X amount of time, doesn't have to take that long. We live in a very different culture that we do today than we did 20 years ago or 30 years ago or 50 years
For
ago.
sure.
So,
Yeah.
if there's a way to leverage these conversations, leverage this technology, to be able to bring some young men that maybe needed some messaging that you and I needed when we were younger, some of those young men that you served that were in bad situations that were behind bars,
Yeah.
then, it becomes a calling. And if
Yes.
we can create that environment, that community where we can say to ourselves, here's what we serve. We're not here to save. I don't save, but
Yeah.
I serve. There's a big difference. So, that's what modern day Don is right now. And we're going to continue to build that into some live events that young men are going to find a lot of value in. And it's going to be a fun future.
I love it, man. I love I guess I'll call it a movement per se, right? Like, when I was, so my background, I think I mentioned to you, right? I worked in juvenile probation for 22 years of my life. Before that, I spent about 3 years working with the YMCA. So I worked with that demographics also, youngsters, right? Youngins, right? And sports and stuff before I went into probation. So I worked with everything from like the runaway to capital murder and everything in between, right?
Okay.
And here in Texas, in the like I said, 22 years, right? So, and I've been retired 4 years, so it's been quite a few years that I was involved in that, and it was rough for a few years with some of those demographics, right? And but ultimately, there was a very big common denominator, which is what you're speaking about, right? Which is there's values that were lacking, and many times it was because of a single parent household, right? It's not an excuse because I was raised by a single parent. So I won't make that excuse, but I will make that acknowledgement that many
Sure.
of those demographics that's part of the at-risk criteria, right?
Sure.
That's labeled, but most of those young youngsters, young guys, that I worked with were lacking the male figure. And I remember at one time there was a program that we worked with here locally. It was called Hombre Noble, right?
Okay.
Noble, and so like honorable men, right? And it dug deep back into like the Hispanic culture and things like that. And there were some folks, and they had created this amazing platform. They had created amazing trainings and curriculum, and they had a lot of stuff. So tell me a little more. Can you tell my audience where the modern day Don is headed? What I know you guys are talking live events. I love that. I want to support y'all how I can. So we're talking live events. What kind of ongoing? I know earlier you mentioned coaching. So what kind of elements could folks maybe who have a young man in their house or in their family, right? Because I know I had uncles, right? I had tios, I had people that would pour into me, but not everybody has that, right? Not everybody has that, right? So if there's a mom that's watching this, or a tia even, right? Because I had tias that really poured into me too, but if they're like, well, tell me more, like give us a little more about that if you could.
Right. Sure. Yeah, the starting point is what has changed our world over the past 20 years, which is content.
Yes.
Right. So we're creating content. We're having conversations. We're capturing those conversations, and we're putting them into bite-sized nuggets and putting them onto the social channels. Right. So, and that's a fancy way of saying Instagram and YouTube. Right. But
Yeah.
that's where we're starting. We're starting in the content side of things. So, for example,
Okay.
if you had a podcast like your podcast, but that is specifically designed to bring great examples and to talk about what young men should give an F about to become a modern day Don: faith, family, fatherhood, fitness, fashion, finances, specifically intended for that audience, right? That's the starting point. Because what that does is at least there's a channel. Maybe when you and I grew up, maybe there was only 4 or 5 channels to choose from. Then we got cable. Now there was ESPN, that was only sports, and MTV, which was only music, right? So what the YouTube has democratized the accessibility to create a channel geared towards whoever you want to talk about whatever you want, right? So with that democratization of the playing field from a distribution perspective, now that allows us to create programming that's specifically designed for a target demographic, right? So again, fancy way of saying YouTube channel.
Yeah.
In making it understandable that people can really grab hold of it, and they're like, you know what, wait a second, that makes total sense, I'm in. Right? Rather than just pointing and saying YouTube, because that's what everyone's doing. No. Let's give an understanding to say, this is why we're doing it as well. So that's the starting point. As we do that, we're also going to be building a community that young men can join. It's a free community to start. And from there, we use a tool called School, SKOOL. And it's a platform that was launched by Alex Hormozi probably about a year and a half ago.
Wow.
And it's an online platform that allows young men to go in. There are classroom opportunities for us to put content to learn from. But most importantly, it creates the community, right? Because I'm a firm believer that these young men or men in general need access to good examples,
Yeah.
but they also need access to other men on the same path as them, other young men on the same path as them, other adult males on the same path as them, right?
Sure.
Because it's uncomfortable for some people to hear adult male, but it doesn't mean everyone's a man if they still act in adolescent ways.
Yeah.
Um, so that's something that's very important. So the two starting points are content. Then from there, the school community that we're building out, which is a community that young men, that men in general will have access to. You're going to get a private invite also,
Yeah.
because what that does is it allows an engaged community, right? Where you might chime in and say, "Hey, everyone, here's an interesting book I just read, um, and I'm going to I'm going to record a 20-second video about it, or I'm just going to write a little something about it, and here's who it's geared towards, and who knows, maybe that message that you put in gets to a young man that is in Seattle, Washington,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
or that is in in Spain, and he's on a path, and at the same time where he is and where he's living, he doesn't have access to these types of positive influences. And again, we're not in the saving game, we're in the
Right.
serving game. It's a big difference.
I love
So
that.
if we
Let me,
create that, yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jason. Finish your thought.
So if we build out this community, then that can allow it to grow organically in and of itself, and that's going to be the goal from there. And then step three, as we get into the live events, the goal there is to do a live event where these young dons can come together, and then also be able to have live experiences where they'll be able to get access to some bigger name influences, but most importantly, to be able to come together and be in those rooms with one another.
Yeah, I love it. So I know we spoke about it, but if you could share with the audience that target age group that you guys are focusing on, um, I, if you could share with our audience.
Sure, sure. The target that we're gearing towards is 17 to 24, right? We believe that that generation was raised um, differently. It's not about whether things are good or bad, or who acts in one way versus acting in another. That has nothing to do with it. It's very different. And if we believe we can get to that generation leveraging certain tools, and that's what we're going to do. So it's that demographic, that we're really gearing ourselves towards, that we think we can make the biggest impact on.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think y'all definitely hit the mark with that. Because before I ever worked with juveniles, with juvenile offenders in Texas, 10 to 17. Before I ever
Hmm.
worked with that age group, I worked with adult offenders. I worked at an
Hmm.
adult parole violator facility for a year, and
Okay.
having worked with that demographic, quickly I knew I didn't want to work with that demographic forever in the corrections field.
Really?
Yeah,
It
adults.
was more, it was harder to get through. They were set in their ways.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I mean, we're once we're grown men, right? We're pretty set in our ways, and it takes some deep down healing and some deep down, redirection of our own to say, you know what, I'm going to go down this pathway. I'm going to work on
Yeah.
my self development. I'm going to do this instead of this because that doesn't serve me anymore. It
It's a
takes a
great
lot.
point.
Yeah, it takes a lot for a grown man to be able to do that. So that target audience that you're focusing on, 17 to 24, very capable of following some good direction, very capable of making some better choices when the better choices present themselves to them, right? When they're
Hmm.
handed in front of them, right? But
Hmm.
the problem is if the 17 to 24-year olds don't have the opportunity and they're not seeing that, they're just going to
Hmm.
continue down the pathway that they've already developed. So yeah, so I would definitely agree, man. I learned early on that I did not want to work with adults in a parole
Yeah.
violation facility, because there were guys there that I learned at an early age, institutionalization, right? And
Mm.
there were guys that had it already, they were institutionalized. They preferred to be incarcerated than to be out in society. And that's a horrible thing, so I really do, like I said, I'm drawn to the modern day Don. I love the concept. And, I think that, you guys are going to do a lot of good for a lot of young men, and help them.
Well, thank you, and it's great for you to share your stories as well of experiences, right? And those stories, can potentially help some of the young men that are in places of development, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it makes us realize that there once was a rite of passage for boys into manhood,
Mhm.
and that doesn't exist anymore. Interesting side fact is that I just found out the other day that the word teenager was invented in 1944. So the word didn't exist. It
Wow.
was a marketing ploy that they were trying. It was a marketing term
Yeah.
that marketers created to sell to that age demographic, and it
Wow.
was just invented. And I found that really interesting from the thought that we extended adolescence in certain instances, right? And the greatest generation less than 100 years ago went to war at 18 years old,
Yeah.
and now we have teenagers and young adults that aren't quite making some decisions until much later in life. And again, I'm not here to criticize anyone. I'm just
Yeah.
here to point out that we having a rite of passage has been something that's been part of the human experience
Yeah.
in for forever,
Yeah.
and that's something that we lack. It's something that is needed to be done with other men. Uh, I come from a community of a lot of single mothers. I come from a past of a father who struggled with alcoholism, with uncles who struggled with drug addiction, with
Mhm.
a neighborhood full of uh, troubled men
Yeah.
that then created false kings. And the false kings that we looked up to and idolized became false idols of sports figures and musicians. And now the new idols that the vast majority of people worship are in fact entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
We've almost created this idolization of entrepreneurship and of wealth, um, which is very interesting. That didn't exist, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. It wasn't this pure idolization of entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
But it's a very interesting place to be. There used to be a rite of passage. The word teenagers made up boy and
Wow.
man, girl and woman.
Yeah.
So let's figure out what needs to be done to be able to have that rite of passage in a clean, healthy, constructive way, so that these young men, because they can still be a young man,
Sure.
these young men can be on the right path to build their kingdoms, to make themselves into the head of their families, to be the don of their family, to take dominion of what's theirs, to unwrap the gift God gave them, and to put it to work.
Yeah. I love that. It's strong, man. It's a strong movement, you know. But I think one of the themes that's consistent that I've heard from you since I met you, right, is you mentioned God. And it is ultimately important. And whether it you know I don't hesitate, like when we spoke earlier, pretty much open, free range show. And it's important to give recognition to that, to God. And because I've said this before, here at the office, here at DG Enterprises, we believe the road to many is through one. And as long as we keep God in front of us, He's going to lead us to all of His children.
God
And
bless.
we
Amen.
pray. Yeah, we pray that every day. Like, God, bring us your children so we can help them, right? So that's what you're doing. That's what you and the other gentlemen are doing at the Modern Day Dawn is just helping God's children, So
That's it. And if we can serve, that's why I've said it a couple of times. Look, I'm not here to save. I'm here to serve.
Yeah.
And maybe some of the experiences that you had in your work experience, that there were some men that needed to be saved, and maybe that was an experience where they needed to be saved by God. That was out of our pay grade, right? So.
Yeah.
And it's like, no. I want to be in a position that I can serve, and if there's a way that we can serve up a meal that can help these young men, there's something in it that makes me feel that one day down the road, you're going to be there. There's going to be a great group of sages, and there's a great book that I'll bring up around the sage word, which is have you heard of an author, John Eldridge?
I've heard the name. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so John Eldridge wrote a great book called Wild at Heart, but he has an even better one called Fathered by God. And he talks about the masculine journey. And the masculine journey he has laid out: boyhood, cowboy, warrior, lover, king, sage.
Wow.
And it is absolutely fascinating. And his argument is that at times, if we're injured or receive some type of trauma, or we just don't have the right guidance, we're stuck in some point of that path. So we all know someone that is a 40-year-old cowboy,
right?
Or a 40-year-old warrior, or if you think of the movie The Lion King, is wounded in boyhood and stays Hakuna Matata. He stays in boyhood.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
We all know those guys back in the neighborhood. You're like, why are you still wearing baggy clothes and a backwards fitted hat? And you're like, why are you dressing like a boy?
Yeah.
It's because that's what's most comfortable. And what I found is that in a lot of these stories that we resonate with as men, there's a common theme. And the theme is a sage that comes in to that boy or young man's life to pull him through the process. So in The Lion King, Simba, Hakuna Matata, means no worries. And Nala comes along and he's like, hey, and he wants to be a lover, right?
Yeah.
But he can't because he hasn't been a warrior yet. So he tries to be a warrior, but he doesn't have it in him. And he doesn't have a king because his father's dead. So what does he need? His sage, who is Rafiki. Rafiki's got to come and hit him with the staff, make him look in the pond and say, remember who you are. Remember you're one of God's children. Remember you're born of royalty. Right? When he looks up to talking to the clouds, he's not talking to Mufasa, he's talking to God. He's talking to his father. And he says to him, don't you forget what's yours. Don't you forget who you are. And when he goes through that, when he becomes a warrior, when he fights the fight he was supposed to fight, then he could become a lover to be a king before he could become a sage. And the theme goes in many stories, whether it be Yoda in Star Wars, whether it be Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, whether it be, you're always going to have this sage that appears and provides this wisdom that helps these young men, because young men, they have the wrong kings, but we can't. There are a few king examples. They need sages to be able to help them to get to where they need to be. So whether it be Rafiki, or whether it be Yoda, or whether it be Gandalf, we need these sages. I need sages. I seek sages every day to help me on my journey. I'm just figuring this out along the same way too, Jacob. Right?
Yeah.
And I say that with the utmost humility, and that this movement was born from me working on me.
Yeah, that's it. So
I'm
true.
Still on my path, my man, and the more I continue to build and grow, hey, listen, I'm just trying to figure it out myself, and there's something to be said about getting up a rung in the ladder and putting your hand back down, and at the same time realizing that there's probably a sage sitting under the oak tree over there that has climbed a ladder or two in their lives. That we may or may not be listening to, but That's the key. The key is sages. We didn't have them growing up, but we need sages in our lives.
Yeah, that's strong. Yeah, that and that's what it's all about. Like you said, I think about sometimes when I put content out there, I put this message because it resonates with me then, right? Like I don't create content based upon like, well, let me go develop this message that I think somebody might like. No,
Okay.
it's I usually put something out there that resonates to me that I find of use, like of the topic of the subject matter. And that's kind of my rhyme to reason, which is probably totally off from the rest of the world, right? Creating content. But I've got a thought and I put it out there. I put that thought out there when it comes to subject matter. Typically it's entrepreneurship, it's business, some life stuff, because as you mentioned, being a man, like there's levels to this, right? I mean, we just got to keep progressing. We got to keep growing, right? We should never, I believe we should never stop growing, right? And we learn from each other. I'm going to learn some things from you and, other folks and that's what it's about. And as we learn and we're gaining more knowledge, we're passing it back down to the younger generations, which is what you guys are talking about, what you're talking about doing, right? And so yeah, it just really, I love it. It really resonates with me, and I'm excited to see what you do. I'm excited to see that growth. So if I could circle back, so starting now, content based. That's what you got. That's what you got going on. So if there's any viewers that say like, well, how do we find out more about the modern day Don? How do we find out more about what Jason is talking about? YouTube, Instagram, and
Yep.
then you'll be updating there as things progress and as you create live events and as you start partnering with others, I guess, pretty much.
Right. Exactly. The best way to find us is going to be Instagram.
Got you.
My personal Instagram is the real Jason Elias. My friends call me Machi, so if you see or hear anybody calling me Machi, that's who they're talking about.
Okay.
And then the Instagram is Modern Day Don, and then my personal YouTube channel, which is under
Gotcha.
Jason Elias, but you'll be able to see the content and the podcast of Modern Day Don. And that'll be where all the updates can come. And, again, it's this umbrella channel of Jason Elias that Modern Day Don will be a show on there. And, maybe as we continue to go and grow, there'll be even different shows that are targeting, different demographics and who we can say, because at the end of the day, what we'd like to do is create interesting conversations, interesting collaborations, going back to the partnership idea from Jerry, and also create some adventures around it as well. That's something that we're going to do on YouTube. And there's something about the word adventure, right? I mean, there's so many of us that didn't grow up with that idea. We grew up from immigrant parents, and my parents are both born here, but let's just, metaphorically of, parents that instill in us to play it safe, instill in us to, we've already made it to the promised land, right? And, we're already here. At the same time, where's the sense of adventure, right? Where, what are we doing? What are we out conquering, right? When you have that, that little boy that looks at you, every boy wants a hero, right? He acts different when he's wearing the Superman on his chest. He acts different when he's wearing Batman on his chest, right? He acts different. So why don't we still do that today, right? Why don't we still have that sense of adventure? Why don't we still have that sense of conquering something in the name of a greater good, right? And I believe that there's a certain amount of adventure that is in our hearts, which is why so many men watch sports, right?
Sure.
That sense of conquering, of winning, of defeating something. And that's been beaten out of men, unfortunately, I think, for the last, X number of years. But, how do we take that energy and funnel it into something that, is able to serve your family, right? I'm not asking you to serve me. I'm saying that will serve your family. So if we can create opportunities to experience and show levels of adventure that inspire young men to go out, seek adventure, find new opportunities, be the active that we're meant to be the active that the masculine is meant to be in this world, and stop being so passive, right? Passivity is going to kill our culture if we continue to sit by the sidelines and live passively, right? And I think that is an epidemic that we have as a culture, as opposed to being active for what we know is right, based on our moral code and based on our values. And when we do that, we can be active to go ahead and take dominion of what's ours. Does that make sense? I just go off sometimes.
It's all good, man. It does make sense, and
Good to hear.
I definitely think that the message is there, and I think it's going to resonate with a whole lot of people, and I'm sure it already has been, and I love that you tie it all back, just tie it all in together real nice with a bow, and that's one of the things I talk about. I believe there's leveraged opportunity all around us, and I think Jerry Jones was telling you that, right? Partnerships, which is leverage opportunities. But I think a lot of people miss it. I believe that a lot of people miss the opportunity because it doesn't show up in a gift wrap package with a nice, pretty red bow.
Right. Yeah.
They miss the opportunity because they're looking for that. And we just got to be eyes wide open. So I think that, what you're talking about, the movement, that, the modern day dawn, everything that you're working on, sheds light on that, right? Sheds light on like, hey, here's some gentlemen, here's some content, here's some men that have found success respectably and have served their families and served others. And then it's a great example. It's a great place for our young men to be 17 to 24. Yeah. I met a 22-year-old last week here in the office, and just getting coffee out in the hallway. And he's in real estate by day, and he works doing pipe fitting at night in a warehouse.
Okay.
And he's 22, providing for his single mom and his two younger brothers. He'll see this because I'm going to send him this episode. And that's the guy that you're talking about.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and respect to that young man for putting in the work, and for realizing and for stepping up, to take to protect and provide, and maybe even preside over that family that he's responsibility of. And there are times where we're given the responsibility of things and we don't know why. But at the same time, responsibility can be given, responsibility can be taken, or responsibility can be avoided. Right. Yep. So, I respect a young man that says, in this situation, this responsibility needs to be taken. It's been given to me. I don't know why it's been given to me, but I can assure you that one day he'll open his eyes, and because of the struggles that he's worked through now, because of the challenges he's worked through now, because of the weights he's lifted now, there'll be something heavier down the road that's going to be light.
That's right.
Right. And he's putting in his time in the gym. And,
that's right.
You may not know now, but one day you will. Right. And so big shout to that young man, and know that there's a lot of other, men that are doing exactly what he's doing, and he's not alone. And it behooves him to find a community of other men that think alike, that can also provide him a community of stability and of access to, leverage, right? Leverage of ideas, leverage of, opportunity, leverage of opinions. All of that comes into play, and it's not easy to find. And at the same time, if we can provide something that serves, then maybe it'll make a difference in the world. And God's watching, so he sees it. We're not asking for anything, but you know what? We're putting all this love out in the universe. We got to hope that it has a homing device. It comes back to us at some point, which I feel it will.
Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. Well, Jason, it's been amazing talking with you. It's been amazing finding out more about you and Don. And I know we talked a little bit earlier about how they could find you, how the audience can reach you and follow you. So I'll circle back to that. Instagram and YouTube is where your presence are. Is there a website or anything you want to give a plug to as well, or just those two, the platforms there?
Just those are the main two.
Okay,
We do have moderndaydon.com, and right now we have we have it set up where there's a hat that is a part of the tribe.
sure.
So that's what's up there now, and the idea is that this tribe is going to be to the point where wearing that hat is going to become a recognition statement.
Yeah.
And we think that there's going to be a lot of power behind that. But again, the real Jason Elias on Instagram. The YouTube is Real Jason Elias, and you'll see the full Modern Day Don show, and also a lot of clips that are on there. And again, we want to make that well-rounded from the perspective of conversations, collaborations, and adventures for young men to follow along with, become a part of a community, have a beacon that they can look towards for other men that they want to emulate. Right? Don't imitate, emulate. That's a big difference.
Yeah.
So young men, you watching this here, it's great to emulate. Don't worry about imitating. But at the same time, when you're discovering who to emulate, look at character rather than jewelry, as I say. So, jewelry can be put on, character has to be built. So something to think about.
Yeah, strong. Well, it's been amazing. Guys, once again, Jacob Davis, Leverage Nation. I want to give a shout out to our show sponsor, DG Publishing. We've done a lot of amazing things. And I don't know, Jason, I'm going to just claim it and I'm just going to speak it into existence, man. We got to do your book. We just got to do it, man. Like, we got to be a part of that project and get it into a lot of people's hands. So many ways to reach people today, right? Social media, YouTube, all those outlets, the book will never go away just like that, right? Like everything else.
Yeah, and I think we have a title for it already, right? Modern Day Don.
Let's go.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, once again, Jacob Davis, Leverage Nation, Jason Elias, amazing. The Modern Day Don. Guys, follow him, follow his content, get plugged in, subscribe it, like it, share it. Got a son? You got to do this. If you've got a son, you got to get plugged in, right? Like start now. Like don't wait until he's 17, 18, 19, 20. You got to do it now. So once again, guys, this is Leverage Nation.